Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Run Business Rules Where Decisions Are Made with Corticon.js. Today, we are joined by our speakers, Thierry and James. Thierry Fiat is a software architect on the Corticon Business Rules Management System. Fiat has gained broad experience in the development of products ranging from development tools to production monitoring systems. He is now focusing on bringing business rules management to JavaScript, and in particular to the serverless world where Corticon will shine. James Goodfellow is a senior product marketing manager at Progress and focuses his efforts on the Data Direct suite of solutions. Through his tenure at companies like Progress and SAS, he has spent the bulk of his career launching successful marketing campaigns for data and analytics products. I'll now turn it over to James to start the presentation. James?
All right, thank you, Rachel. It's fair to say that business decisions drive progress in any organization. The numbers here are reflective of just that. The decisions that we make and the processes we build to help inform those decisions can and often do overwhelm us. This last point here, that given the abundance of critical decisions, highlights just how time-consuming it can be to handle this volume. And while businesses have found ways to deal with many essential decisioning processes, it is less clear how they can deal with all of those instances and allow them to be adequately addressed. And of course, the volume and rapidity of addressing them is just as important to be able to consider. Our contention, and the data supports this, is that the solution is to automate those decisions. This helps us to ensure that decision processes are successful by greatly affecting the speed and the accuracy of the decision-making process. Simply put, the speed and the efficiency with which decisions are addressed leads directly to more accurate decisions being made, and when those decisions and answers are needed. So not a day later, or not a week later, or a month later, etc. And so stepping back from the theory, it can be helpful to frame this conversation around the real world decisions that businesses constantly make. Here are just a couple of examples drawn from an industry-specific use case and a business function use case. These examples may not cover all businesses, but all businesses, regardless of size, industry, or available data, have many of these similar decisions that are manually made on a daily basis. And if these decisions are recurring and data-driven, they can be automated, leading to better decisions being made more effectively. In addition to what decisions are being made, there's this question of how these rules are deployed. Corticon products have been in constant use among thousands of businesses for 20 years, and historically, the processing of these rules has been in a traditional server-based environment. And this diagram shows how Corticon decision automation takes place in that traditional environment. The business rules are defined in our business user-friendly Excel-like interface. Then they are employed into a decision service that can be deployed in an application server environment. And this solution is time-tested and it's proven to be effective in that environment. But the deployment landscape is in constant flux, and thus how and where rules are deployed has evolved to a much broader arena of decision requirements. Many businesses now have decisions that must be made outside of the traditional server environment. The vast majority of these environments are serverless deployments across web, mobile, and IoT based applications. So the same automation must take place here, as well as so that businesses can keep up with the demands of their shifting architectures. And now that we've established the importance of rules and the migration towards serverless, let's discuss the importance of automating those rules over JavaScript. JavaScript is everywhere. It's serverless, it's in mobile and IT, IoT, it's in web, it's in software as a service. So, what if I could deploy my services and immediately get automatic scalability or elasticity based on how much I'm using it, without having to install and maintain instances and load balancers, et cetera, and not having to pay a dime when I'm not using it? What if I didn't have to worry about updating instances from a security perspective? And what if I could understand the cost of an individual decision service level? According to this chart from Stack Overflow, JavaScript unequivocally dominates As a development tool, JavaScript is the most often used among developers with 11 million active worldwide developers. And, it's the language of the web. 95% of sites employ JavaScript. And so it's at the top of the list when it comes to how companies are choosing to serverlessly apply applications across, IoT and mobile and app and web. So if we reimagine the diagram from a few slides back, you can now see that the rule deployment process on the left-hand side has stayed roughly the same, but the deployment options outside of the server environment have grown considerably. Now you've got these mobile apps and IoT devices and back-end systems and AWS Lambda functions and software as a service applications, right? So now there are an innumerable number of available options for what these new architectures are going to look like. So it's not without its challenges. The challenges that are facing JavaScript developers are not terribly dissimilar from the challenges that faced in-house server-based developers. App developers are generally, though, they're not subject matter experts for rule logic. And so if your rules are around financial decision-making or loan processing or insurance claims, app developers are not generally going to be the subject matters in those areas, and they're not going to have a firm grasp of necessarily the nuances behind the rules logic. And so when you do a just manual application or a manual rewrite of the rules inside of a JavaScript application, they have to be coded by hand. And so not only are they not subject matter experts on the development side, but it takes up valuable time and resources. These resources also affect the morale of the development teams, and they affect the bottom line for management because you're asking people who aren't subject matter experts to make manual coding changes inside of JavaScript applications. And it's not just a one-time write it and be done. It's a write it and then as rules and policies change, also the developers have to go back in and make nuanced updates to reflect those changes. So to that end, we've released a product called Corticon.js. And the premise here is very simple. We want to run rules where decisions are made, right? And it used to be that decisions were made in a server environment, and now decisions more and more are being made in a serverless environment. And so being able to apply those rules in real time in that environment is of critical importance, not only from a speed and time to market perspective, but also by employing that same time-tested, time-honored Corticon approach of empowering the business users and empowering the subject matter experts to make those changes in a single interface and then deploy them across all of these applications is going to be significantly important. And this allows us to address those challenges that I talked about in a couple of slides back. The serverless deployment increases business agility, it lowers operational cost. We'll get into some examples of that, but it also allows for easy integration into the serverless and cloud architectures. And so you can see here in this diagram how that differs from sort of that traditional approach. So what is driving serverless deployments? What are the business needs and the use cases? And these are just a couple of examples. There's a lot more out there. And as a lot of new products hit market, the customers are teaching us in a lot of ways how these can help benefit their bottom line and their businesses. Here's just a couple of examples from a high demand elasticity, by running in an AWS cloud or an Azure cloud. You have the resources available when you need them, and you're not paying for the resources when you don't need them. So one of our examples is an online sports betting firm that we've worked with. And this sports betting firm, for example, focuses on horse racing. And horse racing is not a linear and consistent volume. There are certain times of the year where there are more high profile races, and there are certain times of the year where there are not. And so it's critical for a company that has to run rules on every transaction around this betting to be able to scale up to meet the high demands of, say, the Preakness or the Kentucky Derby, but then also needs to be able to scale down when the race season has ebbed and there aren't as many high-profile races going on. Another example is an ATM or a bank, this particular one in Europe, but these banks are having to run fraud detection on every transaction that happens. And so what they have found is that, there are peak times, say in the pre-COVID area, when people were commuting to and from the office, where they would hit an ATM to pick up money or to make a transaction. And so the available resources and processing power needed to evaluate each of those transactions needed to be able to scale up really quickly during these couple of hours throughout the day where times were peak. Now, if you look at 2 o'clock in the morning, there's probably not going to be many transactions happening, and so the demand there is going to be quite low. So it's that elasticity of demand that makes it far more cost effective for these rules to be run in a serverless environment rather than in a server environment where a company would have to maintain processing power essentially on site to be able to scale up and scale down, and then you've got unused resources for much of the day. Another example is disconnected field agents, right? So this idea that we feel like in many instances we live in a hyper-connected world, and certainly we do, but there are still places and there's still times where we are outside of a Wi-Fi zone. And that doesn't mean that decisions don't need to be made. It just means that, the FedEx driver might be out of internet range when they need to make an update to a delivery. Or in this instance, an insurance company who is covering an area that has low or no internet connectivity, perhaps in an ultra rural area, still needs to be able to evaluate an insurance claim and then determine how much of a payout they have to make based on the aspects of that insurance claim. And so in this instance, the company that we're working with, they're able to take an Android tablet that has the claim evaluation rules baked into the actual application. So there's no need to have to call back to a server. There's no need to have to wait until they're in a Wi-Fi enabled spot to be able to make these decisions. The rules are all run right in the application, right there on the tablet, and decisions can be made on the spot. And that is a huge leap forward in terms of the speed and flexibility that businesses in that particular instance have. And these are just, single examples. But I think every business, especially if you talk about IoT businesses where you're measuring all sorts of data and making decisions on all sorts of data that might happen outside of perfect Wi-Fi, perfect connectivity. Another use case that we run into quite frequently and is worth noting here is application modernization. A lot of companies are going through this almost perpetual modernization process. And as they do, we've got customers that have been working with us for years and have built a lot of server-based rules, and they've worked well. And then as they modernize and they choose to go with more of a cloud-based infrastructure and architecture, they need to be able to wholesale move the same rules that they've written over the years and refined over the years into that cloud-based architecture. And so being able to take, essentially almost an immediate approach to be able to take the rules that were written for one deployment option, and it's written in the same exact application inside of Corticon, so it now can be run from Corticon.js. So this is really about growing with a company and growing with a customer and not having to start over from scratch, which is huge for our customers. So I could probably talk all day long about sort of the business benefits and technical aspects of this product, but I think it's more important to show you how it looks and how it runs in practice. And so for that, I'm going to turn it over to Thierry now, and Thierry's actually going to give us a live demo on how this works. So with that, Thierry, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Thierry Siod. I work on the Corticon team as a developer, and I also write some blogs on Corticon. You can find them there and follow me on Twitter. So we'll have quite a busy agenda here with going through quite a few demos. But first, we'll go through a quick walkthrough of a rule authoring and testing tool so you can get a feel for the tremendous business value you will get out of the product and illustrate what James was talking about just a moment ago. And then we'll go through a couple of demos on how easy it is to create a serverless functions from rules in just a few clicks. We'll illustrate cloud integration into a workflow cloud system. Show you the real power of integrating rules within a larger, bigger application, and illustrate how we can run also on mobile and browser app. Okay, so let's jump into the tool. So for illustrating things here, what I wanted to show is a very simple example, but complex enough so you get a feel for the value the product gives you. So I'm not going to get into all the details of and all the screens of the user interface, but I'll get to a few key screens. The first one we're going to look at is the rule sheet, what we call the rule sheet. Essentially, it's the spreadsheet-like interface that James was talking about earlier. And for illustrating this, I'm going to use, the example of a pay-as-you-use car insurance. Everybody knows what a car insurance is, so that would be a good example. And semi-complex enough to illustrate, but still simple enough to understand what is going on. Let's say that this innovative insurance company wants to charge people per usage per day, right? So they want to charge people on a distance driven, but also on plenty of other criteria. So what is the interface that allows a business analyst, right? Someone who understands very well the business problem, but is not a coder, right? He's not a developer or she's not a developer, right? So it has, we have this interface, spreadsheet-like, it's composed of two main panels, what we call the conditions panel, where you express the conditions to test, and then what actions to take when these conditions are met. So let me take an example to make this concrete. So if I take column 2 here, I can see the business specialist as author a rule that says, hey, if a driver age is 18 to 25, has driven some amount between 1 to 29, but has less than 2 years of driving, I'm going to charge. So now I go to the action. If all these conditions are met, I'm going to charge $4.59 a day. But if I take column 3 here, it's the same situation, but the driver has more than 2 years, so we're only going to charge $3.99. So this is the essence of writing, authoring rules in Corticon.js and Corticon as well. So we feel like any business analyst that can work in Excel could model and write and author rules this way. And this has been very proven. We have had this in use at many customers for many years. But it doesn't stop. I mean, we have a capability to chain these rules together. So in this example, we have what we call a rule flow, where essentially I do my basic daily insurance, what I showed before, but I can chain that to say, hey, once I establish the first basic pricing, let me double click on this, I can also start to author rules based on the zone in which the user, the driver has driven, and now start to express rules in a similar fashion and increment the cost based on how risky the zones are. And finally, I can chain that to computing, adjusting the price of what I'm charging based on the vehicle cost, right? So if a vehicle is much more expensive, I may want to charge a little bit more. So here we have some kind of formulas. I don't want to get into all the details. If you're interested, reach us. We can explain more details. But essentially, what I'm trying to show here is that rules in a typical business are not just very simple if and else. They are typically a set of decisions made and chained together in one package. The beauty of all this is that we have taken great effort to ensure that this is scaling to an enterprise level, right? You can imagine that this in a typical situation, the first one will be quite complex and could be actually one business specialist. The second one would be perhaps authored by a second business specialist. So a lot of capabilities to make this an enterprise scale product. But what can you do out of this? So that's the business analyst side of a picture, right? So now, as a team leader, I'm very happy I can delegate all this rule writing and essentially, let me summarize. At the end of the day, if we look at the last rule, right? I mean, we're gonna have a driver insurance cost for today. So that's great. I mean, hey, you have a business analyst, you take care of calculating this cost. The only thing I care about as an integrator now is, hey, give me this value if I give you the list of drivers and all the GPS data and everything that I have collected on a daily basis. So what I can do now as an integrator is come to this rule flow and package rules for deployment. And we have a couple of options here. We'll come back to them. But for the sake of the next part of the demo, we're going to demo how we can deploy very easily to a serverless function as AWS Lambda function. So we're going to pick this first choice and click Finish. So what we're going to see here is how we can get in just a few clicks my rules deployed into a serverless function, highly scalable, highly elastic. Okay, so I'm going to click on the create function and name my function, so webinar demo. And we're going to run it in Node 12. We can pick Node 10 if we want. I mean, not a big deal. Create function. So now that I have my function created, the only thing I'm left with is just uploading the zip file that was generated for me out of my deployment process. So my deployment process created some JavaScript files, and we can explain the details later. But the key point is we get a lambda.zip file that I can use directly and upload to create my decision service. And now, in just these few clicks, I have created a highly scalable serverless function. So let me go back to the tool and just show you one more thing. Not only you can author the rules and have your business analyst write all these complicated rules, but you can also let this business analyst test them so that they are the ones who author them. They know that if a driver is 19 and has a vehicle cost of such and such and has driven only 2 years, right? The cost should be so and so. So the business analyst can very simply, without having to write any code, drag and drop here drivers and change the values here, right? I mean, they can come here and say, I want to test a 21 years old, right? And execute this test. This would essentially run the rules, so package all the rules and run them, and produce the output for all the drivers. And additionally, compare that to what is the expected value. So in this case, I modified something and we expected 19, we got 21. I mean, that's, of course, part of the demo. So at the end of the day, you have a mechanism not only to get out of your rule team a set of rules that you trust and you only care about giving it data and it gives you back the proper result, but also you can trust that the team has all the tool and mechanism to test all this. So just to close the loop on this, let's take this data. So we have a quick way here to export all this data. And you can see we have multiple drivers here. And we're going to do the same thing in the Lambda function. So AWS Lambda has a way to create a test event. They call them test event. So it's essentially one way to pass the data. And you can see here, the data I'm passing into my decision service is JSON data. That's the common format that a lot of people use in JavaScript. So very easy to process JSON data in JavaScript. So now, just to close the loop on all what we did, let's click the test and show that my decision service worked. And actually, let me scroll up here. We have better details. We can see that my insurance cost for today for first driver was computed as this, and etc. The second one, you know, it's more expensive. So if we now, I think, you know, all this is kind of look magical, right? I mean, in a sense, I mean, hey, you just have business analysts write rules and I click a few things, I have something running in the cloud. I don't have to deploy any server. It's highly scalable. You know, it's going to work very fast, and I don't have to pay anything if I don't use it. All the nice properties James talked about. I think it's so powerful, but I think it's worth stopping for a moment and summarize what we've seen, right? What we've seen is in Corticon, we have a very powerful no-code tool, right? I mean, if I jump back here, that tool that lets business analysts author business rule and very complex business rule. We have customers who write thousands of rules, hundreds of thousands of rules. I mean, we have seen a tremendous usage of this product. And we have also so that's on the end, on one end, and on the other end, we have a very simple mechanism to export this set of rules to create a serverless function as an example. And we'll see also how you can use that in other environments soon. So as a project leader, you can see the tremendous value this will bring to your projects. You will gain agility and, most importantly, a lot of productivity. In fact, many customers have reported productivity gain, and productivity gain up to 90% in developing the rules. So we feel like super excited to provide these environments for the new world of serverless cloud, mobile, and web. Okay, so let me go back to my slide here. So just to conclude on this first part, our no-code rule offering and testing system is an enterprise grade. It is very proven and very stable. It has been in use for many years at a lot of customers and provide a lot of productivity gain. Now, let's talk about deployments. We have seen, I mean, if I go back here to my rule flow, I can package my rule for Lambda, but as well for Azure Functions or for browser and Node. Essentially, giving me a lot of flexibility in targeting a specific cloud or multi-cloud, right? But you can as well target on-premise with a Node target. We can target mobile and browser. We'll talk about that. So what are the benefits, right? I mean, I start to read, you know, some of the main issues that people are talking about in cloud environment is vendor locking. They don't want to be locked into a specific cloud vendor. Well, here we provide not a full unlock for all your 100% of your project, but at least for all the business rules, you have a total vendor independence. You can decide to have this set of rules deployed on AWS, and then have another set of rules for processing something else on Azure, for example, and perhaps another set of rules to process on the client side, as we will see soon. So definitively no cloud vendor lock-in with our mechanism. But additionally, when you are a team leader and you need to move forward with new environments, it can be very demanding to train everybody on your team to all the new development environments. In particular, for the cloud and mobile, these are very different environments, very tough to train everybody. So we have gone through great effort to separate the authoring mechanism to remain totally independent of the technology to which the rules will be deployed to. So that's very important because essentially that means you don't need to train your team, at least a team that is authoring the rules, on the specificity of cloud or mobile development. And you can be ensured also that you can start with developing rules for, say, on-premise because your team is not yet up to date, right? And you want to transition slowly, little at a time, a few services into one cloud vendor or another, or maybe start to put a few things into a mobile browser. With our solution, all what you develop here is reusable in various environments. So again, we provide a lot of value here. So now I'm going to switch gear and go to the next step in our agenda and show an example of a composite application. This is essentially, we wrote for a customer, we wrote a demo solar rebate application. They wanted to see how that would work in the cloud. So we decided to tackle it on and create this composite application. So a composite application essentially is an application in which there are a lot of services that are involved, and not all the services are created by Corticon. So we wanted to show how well we integrate with other services, and also how we integrate in, for example, the AWS workflow system. So how we integrate well in a cloud vendor workflow system. Essentially, to try to show how we have developed Corticon.js to be a cloud-native solution. So let me switch now to last part of the demo here. So this is my Solar Rebate UI. Essentially, this is web UI. It doesn't matter too much. We don't need to spend time here. This is not where the rules are running. But essentially, we're collecting information here. The user can enter information about their property and whether they want to have a loan offer at the end. So let's not worry about too much the details of the values here. But the key thing is when we're going to click on the next button, we're going to execute a workflow in AWS to execute various services. So we have put a few images here to illustrate the step. So maybe a little bit hard to read. So we have essentially executed this workflow and got some results, right? So I mean, like a traditional application would do. But if we switch to the AWS console again and look at these so-called step functions, the workflow system in AWS, we can see this is the definition of a service. So the key thing I want to point out is, okay, there was a starting mechanism we invoked via an HTTP request, the service, and we started it. And what you can see here, maybe let me increase the size a little bit. Well, before I increase the size, the first thing you can notice is we have a couple of primitives we use out of the AWS system. So we want to illustrate that we can, the first primitive here is this big square, shows that some tasks are running in parallel. The Solar Rebate here and the REST Solar price are running at the same time. So I want to illustrate we can support that no problem. Of course, we support sequential execution here, and we support also conditional execution as well. So let me increase a little bit the size so you can see things a little bit better maybe. So what we can see here is everything that is prefixed with DS is actually a Corticon decision service. So the REST Solar price is not a Corticon. And this is an example where typically when you run complex decisions, you don't have all the data at once. You start, you have some data that the user has entered, but you don't know, for example, what is the current today's price of a solar panel? Or what is the current kilowatt hour pricing for this specific region or this specific town, right? So here we make a call to a REST Solar service that is going to give us these parameters. Out of this, we compute some constant we're going to use in the rest of the workflow. Don't need to get into a lot of these details. The key thing here is to see that at the end of the day, we are mixing Corticon decision services within a complex workflow and calling other services. So that's the composite in the composite application is about, right? I mean, be able to use existing service, external services, things that you rely on. For example, here, when we get the choice of a loan, right? I mean, we want to get, we calling a REST service to give us the list of loans the user will be entitled to, and then do some more computation after. Okay, so that's that was my composite app demo. Hopefully, you'll see how tremendously valuable it is, and see how we integrate well. We are cloud native, integrate well into cloud vendor solutions. The last part of this presentation I want to talk about is. We have a couple of other demos. So by the way, the demos I just showed on the composite application is available on the same GitHub. So all our demos here are available here. I invite you to check this GitHub, submit ideas, ask questions, etc. So let's talk a little bit about mobile and browser, right? If you look in there, we have a React Native demo. This is essentially to illustrate how a mobile device can run in offline mode. So for example, the application like James was saying, right? You have, most of the time you have good connectivity, but you may have someone working on in a basement, down in the basement on a device and need to diagnose a problem with a machine that has no connectivity. Well, you can have a use case where someone has to do insurance and they travel in the field. We had a customer we work with, actually, that's why we developed this application, in a country where their field agents go to places where they have very poor connections, and they still want to be able to run the application on a tablet and show all the possibilities and finish potentially a business transaction even when they have poor connectivity. So this application illustrates how to do that. And it's essentially a car rental application where we compute a premium with some rules, and the rule can run offline, locally in the device, or they can run online as an AWS serverless function. And finally, you can run the same kind of rule in a browser. We have a customer that has started to use the product and is interested in running some rules in a browser to help in the creating a more responsive user interface. So that's my last slide. I'm going to talk a little bit about the benefits of client-side rules. What we have seen with talking to customers is that they are actually very interested in taking some of these rules and making them available on the client side. Sometimes it's to improve usability, avoiding a round trip to the server, or the scalability, improving the scalability and performance of the entire solution, because the more you can offload to the client, the better off you are. So, but at the end of the day, what the customers are reporting is they see this as a very good mechanism to share rule across various platforms and have a single source of truth. They see the flexibility in deploying all just some decision service in the clients versus a server as giving them a lot of freedom to do their project migration or creating new projects, knowing very well that they will have a lot of flexibility how they can adjust. Right, you can start thinking, hey, I'm gonna put all these roles on the server. And then you start realize, hey, this is too slow here, or I want a very responsive UI where I want to enter a few data and have my rule run so that I can immediately prompt the user for additional data based on some conditions. So all in all, we think we've created a great product that fits a lot of use cases. And as James showed you, there are a lot of use cases to process out there. On that, James, I'm going to turn it back to you and to conclude the webinar.
All right, fantastic, Thierry. Thank you so much. So the next thing we're going to cover after Thierry's fine demo is we're going to jump into a few questions that have come in, and I appreciate everybody sending in questions. Probably won't get to them all because there's a lot, but we'll start, and then anything we don't get to, we will follow up after the fact. So Thierry, I'm going to call on you for some help on some of these questions, and some I should be able to handle myself from a business value standpoint. So Thierry, I'll throw this first one to you. How big are the generated JavaScript rule bundles?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Actually, I should have shown that in more details when I was exporting the rules. They are not very big. The key thing is all the dependencies are all bundled together. So one thing I forgot to mention, there is absolutely no servers to run. Everything is inside the bundle. And the bundle is a little bit more than 50K. Let me actually check the one I just generated. The lambda.zip was 51K when it's exported and unzip, it turns into 190K. So pretty small in terms of today's standard.
Oh, nice. Okay, good to know. What sort of problems might I see running JavaScript rules on different platforms? So I think I can take this one. Rules should execute the same regardless of where you run them. They should execute the same in Corticon Studio or traditional Corticon as a node deployment in a browser or as a serverless function. So if you have a problem, it's likely not specific to the platform and the integration of the rules, as it's not really bundled with the rules themselves. Next question, can I take my existing Corticon rules and use them in Corticon.js? Yeah, that's a great question, and I think that goes back to the use case that we discussed earlier around modernization. Somewhat. It depends what the Corticon features are used, which Corticon features are used in the rules. The rule assets, files and such are format compatible, but not all Corticon runtime features are implemented in Corticon.js. So Corticon 1.1, which is coming out this month, which is sort of JS 1.1, which comes out later this month, it'll add in rule messages and more collection operations to JS. Increasing overall compatibility with Corticon, but it's absolutely 100% our plan to make it as easy as possible, and we're very much most of the way there. Make it easy as possible to take the rules that customers have been writing in traditional Corticon Studio and making them transferable directly over into Corticon.js. And Thierry, I'll send this one to you. So what about Google Cloud or other serverless platforms? And I think where they're going with this is Corticon.js sort of agnostic around the cloud or platform that is being used?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Yes, we have created an engine and a role system that is not dependent on the specific target platform technology. So we feel, I mean, of course, for V10, we have targeted a specific set of what we call wrappers for AWS and Azure or Node and mobile and browser. But we feel that because we don't use target specific technologies, we are confident the bundle can be used in a lot of environments, including Google Cloud. In fact, we are currently working on making Google Cloud one of the template we're going to provide in near release, in a future release. But all in all, we are running pretty generic JavaScript and should work on a lot of platforms.
All right, good. Thank you. And then the last question I wanted to pick up on here is about pricing, because everybody always wants to know about pricing, and I fully understand. So just to paraphrase, how is Corticon.js priced, and is it included in Corticon Studio? To the latter, no, it's not included in Corticon Studio. This is a wholly separate product, and pricing as a result is priced somewhat or fairly differently than the way we typically price Corticon Studio. Because it is cloud-based in general, we tried to price it as cloud-based in general. So because in the cloud, if you're talking about AWS or Azure, you're paid for what you need. And so we felt like it was critical when figuring out the pricing for JS to carry that forward. And so we want JS pricing to be pay for what you need. So you subscribe to it, you pay based on the number of rules or the amount of processing that you're going to need. And then as you are moving forward through the usage of it, if you find that you're using more than you initially needed, then we have tiers set up so that you can tier up to the next level mid-contract and be able to get additional price breaks for using greater amounts of volume. So we tried to make the pricing as cloud friendly as the way that the cloud services make their pricing available. So I hope that helps. Obviously, we can't get to everything. Just a couple of next steps. If you want to learn more, and we hope that you do, the cool thing here is, just come try it for free. So if you go to the progress.com/Corticon-JS website, and you can also get there off of anywhere in the progress.com website. If you come out here, you can learn a little bit more about the product. You can also, try it out 100% for free and see how it works and see how it's going to work in your particular environment. We hope that you'll do that, because I think just as Thierry was demonstrating, it's one thing to hear about how cool it is, but seeing it in action and then seeing it as something that you can actually get in there and play with is a lot more impactful. So with that, I will say thank you to Thierry for joining me today and for the wonderful demo, and thank you to Rachel for kicking this all off. And from myself and everybody here at Progress and Corticon, I'd like to say thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to hearing from you soon.